Derrick Henry is on pace to break multiple NFL records this season. Right now, at the time recording this, he has 783 yards on 162 carries, plus 16 catches for 138 yards, for a total of 921 yards from scrimmage. That puts him on pace to finish the season with 459 carries for 2,219 yards on the ground and 2,610 yards from scrimmage. Those numbers would break 4 different NFL records. Let me introduce you guys to Ace Defender. It's a high-quality SRPG masterpiece, combining authentic turn-based RPG battle with tower defense elements. The storyline is as follows. A rebellion in the Dragon Clan threatened the balance of good and evil in the world. Alapita, the Silver Dragon Princess, escaped with the Creation Crystal to the human lands. There she awoke the Creation Crystal and summoned heroes to fight evil with your help. Now there are 5 different hero factions. You have Divine, Demon, Shadow, Nature, and Light. You start with 48 heroes, and then there are 2 new heroes released every 2 weeks. You can level up, combine heroes, and equip gear to create a powerful lineup. Now for the gameplay modes, you can play in 1x speed, 2x speed, or even 4x speed if you want to speed up the battles, or if you want to slow it down and watch each interaction. Now the Expedition is the solo mode. PvE is when you explore dungeons and regions, engage in trials, level up your heroes, and collect rare items. And then PvP, of course, when you fight against other players within your server, in the arena, or across server in the King's Arena with multiple lineups. Now the newcomers reward is for the new users to download the game from the link in the description. You'll get 10 Royal Recruit tickets after completing level 2 to 8. You can use the tickets by clicking Sky City, then Tavern, and then Recruit 10 times. So what are you waiting for? Come help me summon heroes and fight evil by downloading Ace Defender today. He's doing all this while not even being a 99 overall in Madden. I still don't know how it's possible that this man's still only a 97. Maybe the update will happen today and he might get put it to 98 or 99, but it should have been happened. Like it's crazy amount of disrespect he gets. Now in this experiment, there are going to be a few rules, okay? Number 1, he will be the starting running back, of course. He will be the starting power halfback and the third down running back no matter what. So you can see he's 4 less overalls than these 2 guys, but we need to get him as many touches as possible. Now in order to make sure we don't have too much of an influence, I will not be touching the scheme or the playbook. So he's going to have to do it on his own. Now first up is the Chicago Bears. They're starting a 65 overall at center and a 70 overall right tackle. Quick plug, I'm doing the Chicago Bears franchise on my second channel. So yeah, I've already gone in depth about this team. Henry's going to have his hands full. He takes the Bears to a 13-4 record, first in the NFC North. Ended up with the 3rd most rushing yards, 1,776, but not quite 2,000. McCaffrey and Chubb both had more. He had 19 touchdowns. So 2,000 is not far-fetched. You know, it could happen, but let's just keep track of how many rushing titles he wins. So right now he finished 3rd. He's 0 for 1. Von Miller finishes 2nd for MVP. I've never seen a defensive player finish that high. We got to check his stats. But Henry finishes top 7. In case you guys are curious, Von had 26 sacks, 2 picks, 16 tackles for a loss, 85 tackles, 3 deflections. On to the Cincinnati Bengals. His O-line is going to be even worse than the Bears was. 0 guys in the 80s. I don't know if he'll even finish top 3 in rushing, but he's Derrick Henry for a reason, so hopefully he proves me wrong. He takes the Bengals to an 11-6 record. He ends up 7th in rushing, which is very solid behind that O-line. Now this is the one where I think he could easily get to 2,000 yards, depending on how often they run the ball. Because this offense is stacked. Even without Henry, now you add the best running back in the league. The scheme is a vertical power run, which literally says there's commitment to the power run game. I would be shocked if he doesn't get close to 2,000, or at least in the top 3 for the rushing title. 3 straight playoff trips for Derrick Henry. This time 12-5 on the Bills. And he's back in the top 3. There's a 2,000-yard rusher, but it's not him, it's Zeke. He gets 1,800. Offense is top 3. He had 19 touchdowns. Broncos have a solid offensive line. They have a game manager at quarterback in Teddy B, so maybe their scheme might hold him back a little bit, but the playbook is built on a power run, West Coast scheme, so we'll see. I think he could definitely end up in the top 3. 4 straight playoff appearances. He takes the Broncos to an 11-6 first place record. And that's the rushing title I'm talking about, man. 15 yards away from 2,000. By far the best rusher in the NFL during this season, man. 19 touchdowns, 6 yards per carry, only 1 fumble on 331 carries. I said we just round up and give him 2,000. I trade away both running backs on the Browns because I don't want either of them taking any carries, any touches away from Henry, man. They have one of the best, if not the best, offensive line of football. We've seen Chubb already rush for 2,000. So, the scheme is, well suited for him. A lot of single back, a lot of I form. It's built on a zone run. I think he gets that extra 15 yards, and I think he gets 2,000. They barely squeak into the playoffs, 10-7, and Henry gets second in rushing behind CMC, 1,888 yards. Offense ends up top 10. Second is still really good. I mean, CMC, a lot of people think he's the second best, or some people still think he's the best running back. Now, the Buccaneers have a phenomenal offensive line. Might be even better than the Browns, with 3 guys pretty much at a 90. You have one of the best blocking tight ends in NFL history in Gronk. The only question is, will they be passing too much and not give Henry the, rushes he needs? No surprises here. They end up 14-3. But he doesn't finish top 3. Offense finishes 3rd in the NFL, and Brady finishing 1st in passing yards does not bode well for Derrick Henry. There's only so many yards to go around. 2 yards away from being in the top 10, man. At number 11, 5 yards a carry. Now he finds himself on the Cardinals with Kyler Nuke, AJ Green, Hudson, the one elite offensive lineman they have. For the first time in the video, Henry does not go to the playoffs. Offense finishes only 17th in the league. He finishes 18th in rushing, but he only had 237 carries. It was just not a rushing offense. Like, that's not what the Cardinals do. And his quarterback won MVP. So he was doing most of the damage through the air. Just not the best scheme, not the best situation for someone like Derrick Henry. Now, the way the Chargers use Austin Eckler, I think Henry could get his most receiving yards and catches. They end up 10-7, good enough for a wild card game. And Henry finishes 15 yards away from another rushing title. Offense is back in the top 3. And McCaffrey on 45 more carries was able to beat out Henry, man. Henry did the best he could. 6 yards per carry is unbelievable. This season was a W, even though he didn't get the rushing title, because he also finished 4th in MVP voting. Now, this is the team I was the most curious about when this experiment started. I mean, you have 4 guys at a 97 or higher. Easily the best offense on paper. The problem is, once again, the scheme. Like, Mahomes, best quarterback in the league. They're in a West Coast spread. I just don't see Andy Reid, running the ball like that. They end up 14-3, first in the AFC West. Offense finishes 2nd. Mahomes finishes 12th in passing yards. There's hope. He didn't quite get the rushing title. 264 carries, by far the least amount of anyone in the top 10. His teammate Mahomes ends up top 10 for MVP voting. But again, he just didn't get the carries, man. He did the best he could. The Colts are one of those rare teams that had 3 guys at a running back who were an 80 overall higher. So I traded all 3 of them. Now, hopefully, they can rely on this amazing offensive line when healthy. And Derrick Henry didn't quite get in the playoffs. They finished 9-8, second in the AFC South. Offense was really bad, 21st in the league. But Henry finished 4th in rushing, 5 yards per carry, not his best. I was expecting better behind that offensive line. Only 12 rushing touchdowns. We've already seen Zeke rush for, I think, close to 2,000, if not already over 2,000 in this video alone. O-line, one of the best ones in the league. So I think for the first time in the video, we're going to see Henry get 2,000 yards on the ground. They easily win their division at a 13-4 record. Offense finishes top 5 in the league, but Zeke wins the rushing title. 2,000 yards on the Titans. Meanwhile, Henry finishes 5th at 1,767 yards. Now, I do see him struggling heavy on the Dolphins. Okay, I'm just going to keep it at that. But if there's a chance for Henry to prove how amazing he is, it would be right now. He gets top 5 in this offense. He's goated. They end up 6-11. Offense tied for the worst we've seen in the video at 21st. But he still ends up top 5 in rushing behind that offensive line, which is one of the worst in the league, man. I can't believe it. 18 touchdowns to go along with it. Almost 100 yards per game. And a top 9 finish in MVP voting. By far his toughest test is on the Eagles, and not because of, a bad O-line, because they have one of the best ones in the league when healthy, but because of the coach. Okay, that playbook is a lie because they don't run the ball at all. They go 7-10 second in the NFC East. Offense finishes bottom half of the league, and Henry finishes 7th in rushing behind Miles Sanders, who shows out on the Titans. Now, granted, he had almost 100 more carries. Henry had 5.5 yards per carry. If they just kept feeding him the ball, he probably would have ended up with the rushing title. But to get top 10 in that offense, knowing that the coach does not run the ball, I mean, Henry is just, he's different. Not the most ideal scheme fit on the Falcons for Derrick Henry. But the playbook more than makes up for it. They want to frequently run the ball. A few years ago, it would be the Matt Ryan and Julio show. But I feel like now maybe they might give him more carries than they would have. So he might have a good season. They go 6-11, last in their division. 20th in rushing yards per game. Henry still finishes top 10 in rushing though. They just did not give him the ball enough. He was getting 5 yards per carry, 18 touchdowns. Now he's on a football team running behind one of the best right guards in the NFL, Brandon Scherf. Scheme fits him perfectly. Same with the playbook, so he should thrive in this offense. Well, they finished top half of the league in terms of rushing, but third in the NFC East. We do have a 2,000-yard rusher. His name is Nick Chubb. He had 26 touchdowns to go along with it. Henry finishes 9th in rushing. So he's been in the top 10 on every single team except for one. Now he's with offensive mastermind Kyle Shanahan. And once again, another playbook that thrives on running the ball. Finally, Henry's back in the playoffs. His team ends up 13-4. Offense ends up 7th in the NFL. And he ends up 2nd in rushing, right behind Nick Chubb. 1,900 yards. 17 touchdowns, phenomenal season, and a top 8 finish in MVP voting. The Giants go from one elite running back to another. Saquon, Derrick Henry. He might have a hard time behind this offensive line though. The lone bright spot of the season was their rushing offense, top 10. Everything else was horrendous, but it wasn't Derrick Henry's fault. Back-to-back second place finishes. 1,688 yards, 5.3 yards per carry, 22 touchdowns on the ground, and a top 4 finish in MVP voting. I'm a little bit worried about the Jaguars, okay? I don't know if Urban Meyer is going to have a handle on the locker room, at least enough so to give Derrick Henry the ball enough. I mean, we'll see what happens. I underestimated the Jaguars, man. 10-7 first place finish. Offense, in terms of rushing yards, was top 5 in the league. Another top 3 finish. This time, he ends up 3rd. 1,769 yards. 50 less carries than first and second. I just want to see what happens if he gets the most carries, man. 24 touchdowns, 104 yards per game. And he won MVP for the first time in the video. You know, I'm not going to make the same mistake in my predictions for the Jets because they have the same situation as the Jags. Young quarterback. Maybe they want to run the ball a lot to ease the pressure. So I think he might have a really good season. Their rushing game ends up top 10, but they don't make the playoffs. He ends up 8th in rushing, only 4.8 yards per carry. Would be pretty good for most running backs, but we've seen Henry do it way better than that. Now, obviously, the Lions don't have Stafford anymore. Don't have Kenny G, Marvin Jones. But their offensive line is actually pretty good. Their playbook is built on a power run. He might get 2,000. Once again, Henry works his magic, helps the Lions finish top 11 in rushing, even though they didn't make the playoffs. He finishes 7th in rushing, 5.3 yards per carry. That's the Henry that we know. Now, this one's all up to Aaron Rodgers, okay? If he wants to go ahead and pass the ball, win MVP, then Henry's not going to get too many touches. But if they're blowing teams out, then maybe he will. And I think that's what they're going to do, because there's just so much talent on this team. Offense finishes 2nd in points per game, 3rd in rushing, on their way to a first place finish in the NFC North. And Henry did it, 2,000 yards for, I believe, the first time the video on the Packers of all teams. One of the best quarterbacks ever. You think they'd be throwing the ball, but 6.4 yards per carry. Unbelievable, man. 19 rushing touchdowns. Zeke won the rushing title. He was phenomenal this season too, as he's been like all video. But what a season by Henry. Zeke takes home MVP. Henry ends up 4th. Now, I normally wouldn't say I expect him to get 2,000 yards, but he's replacing McCaffrey, who when healthy gets so many touches, it's not even funny. I just got to assume that the scheme, the playbook, everything is catered to the running back because of CMC, so he has a very good shot at 2K. They end up 3rd in rushing, 154 yards per game, and they finished 1st in the NFC South. It just made too much sense. 2,000 yards for King Henry, 6.3 yards per carry, 23 touchdowns, and a rushing title for the first time in the video. Clean sweep for Mr. Henry. McCaffrey does pretty well on the Titans though, top 3, and he takes home the MVP. The Patriots are in contention for the best offensive line in football, or at the very least in Madden. Okay, they have a young quarterback, Belichick or Griffin Murphy. You know, I feel like it's smart enough to, rely on the run game. The playbook, uses a lot of power run plays, zone run plays, so he should do pretty well. They finished second in rushing, fourth in points per game, and first place in the AFC East. He was this close to 3 first place finishes in a row, but Chubb took that from him this time. He still ends up second, 1,893 yards, 5.5 yards per carry, and 18 rushing touchdowns. Not to mention a top 8 finish in MVP voting. A year ago, the Raiders O-line was amazing. Now it's still okay, but it's not what it used to be. They still have Gruden as the coach in the game, and his playbook is built on a power run, so he might do pretty well. Henry in the rushing game finishes top 6 in the league. Even though they only go 9-8, they still make the playoffs. Unfortunately, there was another talented back in the backfield taking carries away from him, and he only ended up with 1,489 yards on 5.2 yards per carry and 17 touchdowns for a top 8 finish in rushing in the NFL. The Rams remind me of the Packers in that they have a phenomenal passing offense. So defenses can't stack the box. They might go up early and then just rely on a run game. I could see Henry winning a rushing title. Not sure what happened to their pass game, but their rush game was top 6 in the league. They finished last in the tough NFC West, however. He finished 3rd in rushing behind Chubb and Dalvin Cook. 5 yards per carry, 17 touchdowns to go at 1,559 yards. Now, the Ravens have been the best running team in the last few years because of Lamar, which is why I don't expect Henry to win the rushing title or even get close to 2,000 yards. As expected, 1st in rushing. They end up 12-5 and they make the playoffs. Lamar and Henry combined for almost 3,000 yards rushing, and Henry ends up 2nd in rushing behind Nick Chubb, less than 100 yards away from 2,000. Man, he did way better than I expected him to. His teammate Lamar gets 2nd in MVP voting, while Henry gets 6th. Now he's replacing Alvin Kamara in the Saints offense. Last year with Breeze, I would say he would get well over 2,000, but with Jameis at quarterback, I just don't know that defenses are not going to stack the box, but we'll see how he does. Offense finishes 14th in rushing yards, and they end up 8-9, but it wasn't Henry's fault, man. He still finishes 7th in rushing, 1,561 yards, 5.3 yards per carry, 22 touchdowns, and 6th in MVP voting. I'm curious to see how he does in the Seahawks offense. You can't stack the box against Russell Wilson, DK, Tyler Lockett. You just can't do it. So I think he's going to do really well. They end up last in their division. That's crazy, man. The offense finishes 4th in points per game, 11th in yards per game on the ground. Henry finished 7th in rushing, so he wasn't that bad. As a matter of fact, he was pretty freaking good, okay? 5.1 yards per carry, 1,581 yards, 20 touchdowns. And he finished 4th in MVP voting, so he was really freaking good in this offense. If you've seen how much the Steelers use Najee Harris, then you know that Derrick Henry's in for a lot of touches and a lot of yards in this offense. They finished 2nd to last, but the rushing game was top 12. Henry finishes 5th in rushing. Probably should have given him the ball a little bit more. He was getting 5.6 yards per carry. Ended up with 1,600 yards and 17 touchdowns. Assuming Deshaun Watson plays and he has Brandon Cooks to throw to, I don't see how people stack the box against the Texans. You got to respect that passing game, so I think he does pretty well in Houston. Now, I'm not sure what happened to the pass game, but they finished 3rd in rushing and a tie for 1st in the division. Henry ends up 3rd in the league, 6.3 yards per carry, 1,800 yards total, and 25 rushing touchdowns for a 3rd place finish in MVP voting. And last but not least, the Vikings. We've seen some high finishes for Dalvin in this video because Kirk and, the wide receivers make for a really good passing game, which means there should be plenty of room for Henry to run in this scheme. And on his last team, he helps them get to 5th in rushing. Even though they only end up 7-10, Henry did his thing. 3rd in rushing, 1,809 yards, 5.5 yards per carry, 23 rushing touchdowns, and a 3rd place finish in MVP voting. So there's only 2 teams where he did not finish in the top 10 in rushing, and that was the Cardinals when he went 18th, and the Bucks where he finished 11th. He won the rushing title 3 times and got 2,000 yards twice, along with MVP 2 times. So Derrick Henry has proven that he would be a problem on any other team and be otherworldly on a few others as well, man. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to like button, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys on the next one.
Nobody's safe. Came from heaven, we fresh out the gate. And I look like I came from LA. From New Jersey, I look like LA. I'm a water, I'm from in LA. I'ma get it, it's mine for the tape. Ride the beamer when I'm out of state. Could have beat, almost got me a case. Go Olympic, I'm winning the race. Now I won cause I'm killing the game. Talking crazy, I'm going insane. Shifting gears and I'm switching the lane. Hop on stage, just go entertain. Going up so I'm making a name.